Back to Miller. Oh, my goodness.
Herbert.
Sidearm sling, and it's a touchdown.
Tyrese Maxey.
Oh, good spin move by Filipowski for the news. Give him 9.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Beef Upfront podcast here on Pick Swap Media. As always, your host, Ryan Coyle, continuing on today with our preseason coverage leading up to the NFL kickoff, breaking down every single team from every division. Today, continuing on with our NFC South portion of our breakdown, and we'll be hitting on the Carolina Panthers today, who I have finishing third in the NFC South this year with a 7-10 record. I have them going 3-3 in the division, so that will be poor enough for 11th in the NFC, and they will be missing the playoffs again. Not too optimistic about this Panthers team and what to kind of expect from them this season. They do play in the weakest division in football in the NFC South. I think the combination of the Saints, Falcons, Panthers, and Buccaneers is definitely the weakest division in football. Maybe the AFC South as well. Those two kind of rival each other there. But this is a situation where I'm not going to be surprised at any order that these teams wind up finishing in, just because of how I think mediocre all the teams are. It wouldn't surprise me to see a team go 9-8 or a team go 3-14. I'm really open to all kind of comments and suggestions about what the NFC South could wind up looking like. But for my argument's sake, I'm going to have the Panthers going 7-10, third in the division, 3-3 in the division, 11th in the NFC. When you look at last season, it's kind of the same kind of year I think you can expect. 7-10 last year, tied for second in the NFC South with two other teams. Matt Rule fired, I believe it was 5 or 6 games into the season. Steve Wilkes then takes over with Sam Darnold, and he had the team competing for a playoff spot down the stretch, but that wasn't good enough for the Panthers front office and the upper brass. They decided to go out and hire Frank Reich at head coach, who was fired from the Colts last year. And they traded up to number 1 overall to take Bryce Young, the quarterback out of Alabama, and really start off this new era of Carolina Panthers football. So I'm not expecting much more success this year from last year, but we'll get into kind of my takes and the offense, the defense, the coach with Frank Reich, breakout player, and a couple games to watch on the schedule. So when we look at the offense, as we touched on, they made a big splashy move. I believe it was going up from number 9 in the draft. They traded with the Chicago Bears all the way up to number 1 to get Bryce Young. And he's going to be starting for the Panthers from day one. But I'm worried about Bryce Young specifically this year and kind of hindering his development going forward. I'm really worried about the offensive line on this group, just letting him get hit too much. We know the main worry about Young coming out of the draft, why that he wasn't the slam dunk number 1 pick, why people thought maybe it should have been C.J. Stroud or who knows, Anthony Richardson. Some people were arguing his size. His size is something that's going to limit him, and I think was potentially scaring off some teams. But the Panthers fell in love with kind of everything else about him, and they're going to take their chances with his size in this one. He's a very cerebral player, a very accurate thrower of the football. But if he isn't given time, he's going to struggle, and I think he's ultimately going to miss some games this year. He's still a thin, undersized quarterback, and if he's getting hit a ton, I really am worried about hindering his development for going forward. It wouldn't surprise me if he does get banged up to see Andy Dalton, the backup, get some playing time, just because the biggest thing with a young quarterback and allowing him to succeed is surrounding him with talent and protecting him. I mean, obviously you want to have good players around you, but you just look at kind of the leap that Jalen Hurts was able to make. It's no coincidence that he's put in a ton of work himself and has made himself into a really good quarterback. But he's got a loaded offensive line in front of him, and then he also was working with some pretty elite weapons in A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. When you look at Bryce Young, this offensive line is much more bottom half of the league, maybe bottom 10 in the league, and then the wide receivers, the weapons around him, not really anything superstardom that is going to be setting him up for success. So I'm worried about Bryce Young this year and the situation that he's in Carolina. Just even watching Hard Knocks that one night, the Panthers couldn't block the Jets for shit. I know the Jets have a good defensive front and are probably going to have one of the better defenses in the league again this year, but still, he was just getting hit time and time again in that preseason game, and then even in the practices, the Jets defensive line was just destroying the Panthers up front. So if they're unable to keep Bryce Young upright and healthy, he's going to lose confidence, and I think it's going to be a major hurt to his overall development. I am just worried that he doesn't play all 17 games just because he's forced to miss some times due to this offensive line. But they could go out there and change my mind. But heading into the season, I'm worried about Bryce Young. As we also talked about with relating it to Jalen Hurts and the Eagles, had great offensive weapons around him. This Panthers team does not really have any elite options in the passing game. I think that they're going to have to kind of operate under a quick hitting passing game, get the ball out of Bryce Young's hands, and Frank Reich's really going to have to work around this poor offensive line as they want to get their young quarterback moving in the right direction and healthy. Adam Thielen, a really solid veteran player on a good team, but he's the number 2 or 3 option on a really good team, I think. When you look at the Vikings, he was a nice compliment to Justin Jefferson as the number 2, but they were comfortable letting him go, bringing another guy. It's not like Adam Thielen is going to be a major loss to their offense this year. They brought in Jordan Addison, who should be able to do just as good, if not better. Adam Thielen can't be the number 1 receiver on a team, I think, heading into year 10 at 33 years old. And then behind him, DJ Chark projected as an outside receiver who's floated around to a few different spots during his young NFL career. He's had some nice moments, but by no means a star. And then rookie second-round receiver Jonathan Mingo is expected to step in and start on the outside as well. So I think they have to hope that Mingo emerges as a young guy to build around here. Miles Sanders was their big free agency kind of signing at running back. He should see a lot of work after getting that pretty large contract from the Panthers in free agency and had a really nice year last year with the Eagles, but he also isn't running behind that Philadelphia offensive line anymore with Jalen Hurts as the threat and with the elite receivers that Philadelphia brought to the table as well. He's going to see a lot more kind of stacked boxes and not as many rushing lanes. So I'm interested to see if he can kind of make something out of nothing at times and not have those big holes that the Eagles were making for him all of last year. Hayden Hurst, a solid tight end, but they're really just pedestrian at every spot. I was a Miles Sanders fan. I thought playing in the Philadelphia system and behind that offensive line really helped him. But when you're naming elite running backs in the league, you're not throwing Miles Sanders' name out there. Adam Thielen, solid player. DJ Chark, solid player. Jonathan Mingo remains to be seen, a rookie wide receiver. Hayden Hurst, solid player. But they're kind of just all pedestrian. You don't have really anyone in this group striking fear into the defense, I think. You combine that with a young rookie quarterback, I think it could be a really long year on offense, especially if the offensive line doesn't hold up as well. So not too optimistic about this group in year 1 under Bryce Young and Frank Reich, but I still have this team finding their way to 7 wins, and that's because of the defense. Another story here, but a lot of young faces, and if we do see this team more so in that 8-9 to 9-8 range, because I do have the Falcons winning the division at 8-9. That's how poor I think the division is going to be this year. But if the Panthers are at 8-9, 9-8, competing for the division title, I think it's going to be more so because of the defensive side of this team. Defensive tackle Derek Brown, a budding star, if not already one of the star defensive tackles in the league, and it's just gotten better and better since he got into the league. And then when you look at Brian Burns as your main pass rusher on this team, he's a top 5 to 7 pass rusher, I would probably say, from that edge rusher spot in the entire NFL. Shaq Thompson is an exciting linebacker. He's been a guy that's kind of been one of the faces of this defense for some time now. But they just have young guys up front that they're going to be able to rotate in and wreak some havoc. And then they have grizzled vet Justin Houston as well, who's bounced around these past few years. But when healthy and when he's on the field, he's going to produce. He's not a guy I think that they're going to be counting on to play 75, 80% of the snaps, but 40, 45% of the snaps kind of just go rush the passer. I think he still has a role in this league for that. This group is going to be able to get after the passer. I think they're going to be really creative on defense. And the secondary might be one of the best in the league, probably a top 5 group, and I don't really think that's an exaggeration. They got a nice mixture of young guys and veterans that's really going to make up a nice group. J.C. Horn, when he's been healthy in his young NFL career so far, been a shutdown guy. Dante Jackson, another really good corner. Brought in Von Bell in free agency at safety, and then you got Jeremy Chin as well on this defense, who's kind of like the do-it-all guy. He plays the nickel, but he goes up, he blitzes, he plays around the line of scrimmage, he can cover a little bit. He's just your do-it-all type player on this defense. So I really like the mixture of young and exciting talent and versatility on this defense to combine with some existing veterans as well. I do think this defense is going to be a top 10 group. And like I said, they're going to have to carry the offense, I think, on most nights. When the Panthers are going to be winning games this year, I think it's going to be like 17-14, 20-17, stuff like that, where the defense is playing really well and the offense is doing just enough to kind of get by. I think it's going to be a lot of growing pains, as it usually is with a young quarterback, but with a poor offensive line in front of Bryce Young, and not many weapons around him, I think the offense is certainly going to be the less successful unit out of the offense and defense in Carolina this year. When you look at the coach grade for this Panthers team, I'm going to give Frank Reich a B-. I mean, what has he really done as a head coach to get this job, like this bounce back job real quickly? I mean, he got fired from the Colts midseason last year. Did he really already deserve a second shot? Like, I think he's a guy that should have been put back into like an offensive coordinator type role. I don't really think he's that great of a head coach. He doesn't have much playoff success. I think he doesn't have a playoff win to his name. And he seemed like he was like the Panthers guy from all along. I know he had some connections there, but still, this is a coach that I need to see a little bit more. If he's able to get more out of this offense and really develop Bryce Young, then that's another story. But I do like the staff he built. A ton of former NFL quarterbacks there for Bryce Young to lean on and help develop and grow. But I need to see more out of Frank Reich. I give him a B-, kind of in that like C+ type range. He's a bottom 10 NFL head coach for me. Let's see if he can kind of prove me wrong and be better this year. My breakout player for this team on this roster, I don't really think outside of like a Bryce Young, there's much of any other players that you can really point out to as a breakout guy. You already got your established veterans and some of your star players like we touched on with Brian Burns and Derek Brown. So I'm going to go with rookie second-round wide receiver Jonathan Mingo. I think the targets are going to be there for him, and he's going to have plenty of opportunity to play from the jump. So we touched on not many guys suited to have a breakout type season for this Panthers team. It really depends on it if Bryce Young's able to acclimate himself well to the NFL from day one. But Mingo is going to be a guy that should be in the starting lineup and playing a majority of the snaps for this Panthers team from week one. So give me the rookie wide receiver second-round pick as my breakout player for this Panthers offense. And then 2 games to watch for the Panthers this year. We're going to go with week 1 at the Falcons, Bryce Young's NFL debut. That's just going to be something that Panthers fans have been waiting for all this offseason, get their first look outside of the preseason of their hopeful franchise quarterback. And then we'll go week 10 at the Bears on Thursday Night Football. Primetime game for the Panthers here. I think it's their only one of the season. 2 young quarterbacks going at it, most likely if they're both healthy, in Bryce Young and Justin Fields. And if all things do shake right, as I was saying, the defense plays like I expect to, and the offense able to overachieve a little, I think this team could be in that 8 to 9 win range instead of 7 and 10. But I also have the Chicago Bears sliding in there with an 8 and 9 record. So that come year end could be for a potential like wild card spot for a tiebreaker between those two. So not really buying the Panthers hype that I'm seeing some people out there like, oh, don't be afraid of them for the NFC South. But I'm also not going to be surprised if any team wins the NFC South. Even the Buccaneers, which I have finishing last, wouldn't shock me to see them find their way to 8-9, 9-8, and find their way into the playoffs as the NFC South champ. So a very poor, mediocre division I'm expecting down south in the NFC this year. But I'm excited to see if Bryce Young can kind of acclimate himself to the NFL and make these players around him better that I don't really think his supporting cast is that great. Does he have that greatness, that trait in him to make those guys around him better? Remains to be seen at the NFL level, but certainly some stuff to watch with the Panthers this year and should be an interesting track. But that'll do it for this episode of the Beef Up Front podcast. As always, thank you everyone for tuning in. Please like, subscribe, and we will talk soon.